past weekend, I finally had the opportunity to take my Fractal FM3 to some live gigs. I played two different kinds of shows, one in kind of a largish theater, and then one was a bar gig at a really high volume. All right, so I got a little wide range of opportunities to actually test the device out in. And I learned some stuff, and I was really happy with how it turned out. And what I'm going to do in this video is basically kind of go through some of the lessons I learned and kind of talk about my journey with this thing. Now, the first thing is I've never really cared for playing through modelers. I've owned vintage amps, or for the last 10 years I've been playing through a Sir Badger 30 for most of my gigs, and I really like that tactile response of a real amp. Playing through modelers or anything like that, even back in the early 90s, I had an 80A MP1 preamp. I had a Mesa Studio preamp. I've had a Pod Pro rack mount device. I've had some other Line 6 amps. None of them ever felt very good to me, and that really bothered me, you know. And I also just really didn't like how most of them sounded. I could never get sounds that I liked out of them that would compare to what I would get out of like my 1970 Deluxe Reverb or some of the other amps that I've owned. Last year I started watching videos on YouTube about the Fractal FM9. You know, people were talking about the Neural Quad Cortex, the Kemper floorboard or stage, whatever that thing is called, and then this Fractal FM9, and I really got interested in it. Now, I've had a Strymon Iridium for a couple years, and it really didn't work that great as a direct thing for my situation, but I used it for a lot of recordings that you've heard on this channel, and it's been sitting on my pedal board kind of as my emergency out. Like if my amp died, I could actually run direct into the PA and use a Deluxe Reverb model with a greenback IR, which is kind of a representation of what I normally play through now, and actually get through the night. So I've still got that Strymon Iridium. I still like the sound of it. It's still a pretty good device. I actually did a comparison a few months ago when I first got the FM3 between the amp and the Iridium and the FM3, and that was a whole mess. But anyway, so I have experience with a lot of this stuff. This is the first device that actually made me confident enough and comfortable enough that I would actually not bring my actual amp and play through. Now, one of the things that I did was I did a lot of research on monitors. During the pandemic, I basically farmed out most of my live playing work to a couple other players because I just didn't feel comfortable. You know, I decided not to go out and work playing gigs for a while, and now I'm kind of coming back. But everybody was basically using Kemper or Helix in my absence, and the guys in that band were not real happy with how things sounded on stage for various reasons. Some of it was programming choices with sounds, some of it was just monitoring and being able to hear the amp. So what I pretty much did was I wanted to do this in such a way where they wouldn't miss my actual amp, right? They really like when I would come back and play. I did come back and play a couple shows, mostly outdoor stuff during the pandemic, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so good to have you back." And really what that meant was it was so good to have your amp back more than anything else. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure that they wouldn't be unhappy that I was back sonically, you know, on stage. So I spent a bunch of time working up some tones. I watched a bunch of videos like Leon Todd and Cooper Carter and all the guys that seem to really have a handle on the Axe effects in FM3 and FM9 world. And what I really wanted was the amp in the room. I wanted a duplicate of my Deluxe Reverb. There's the one that's sitting back there behind me. Now, for nearly 30 years I've owned this amp, 25, 30 years. Most of the time it's had celestine greenback in it, so that's kind of part of the sound I've always really liked. So I spent some time looking at impulse responses and even dialing it in, and even having my son come in and like be an extra set of ears. And I got pretty close to what that amp sounds like. And that's one of the sounds you're going to hear here. So that's kind of the first thing is I wanted to base my basic sound around the amp that I normally play through. I did some EQ things that I learned from Leon Todd about, you know, basically EQing out the parts of the sound that don't normally occur from a guitar amp on stage. And I also, you know, I went through a couple like stage monitors. I tried using one of my Mackie speakers, which was horrible, one of my normal PA speakers. So that was out. I bought a Mission Gemini wedge because everyone was really excited about those. And what they were excited about apparently was the regular cabinet. The wedge I bought used from Guitar Center in New Hampshire, and it was horrendous sounding. It was really bad. So that got returned. And a friend of mine who incidentally is also in New Hampshire and had actually played through that Gemini cabinet before I bought it, he said, hey, I use these EV speakers, these PXM20 speakers, and I really like it. I think you'll like it. So based on his recommendation, I bought one. We'll put a picture up here. And I'm actually really happy with it. It's got a lot of features, but ultimately it's the best modeler sound on stage I've ever had. I really don't feel like I'm not playing through an amp. I should say, I really do feel like I'm playing through an amp at this point, which makes me really happy. So that's part of the equation, is I actually found a monitor speaker that would make me happy on stage. And it sounded good to the other guys over the weekend. One other kind of like little incidental thing is that speaker has 2 inputs. So one of the gigs that I played this weekend was a fusion jazz gig, and the saxophone player was playing an EWI, or an electronic wind instrument, and didn't really have any kind of monitor during our rehearsals. So we actually used the second channel in my speaker for his EWI, and it actually worked really great, both me playing guitar and the EWI at the same time. So I was actually pleasantly surprised that that was workable that way. I may end up getting a second one of those to use as a vocal wedge, because we don't do in-ear monitors in most of the gigs that I play. It also makes me happy to know I can run just my voice and my guitar through the same speaker and not really have it be a problem. At the beginning of this video, there's a little performance piece of me playing my Telecaster. I just wanted to have kind of like a little jam thing where I used the device in the context of a mix of other instruments. And I'm playing, both guitars are through the Deluxe Reverb model that I'm using, or that I came up with, and the basses even as well, but then also the bass is being run through an Ampeg B15 model too. So it's not completely Fractal. I did do another short test video a couple days ago, just of my straight live sounds, and I like things pretty dry. And I put the video on the forum. It's an unlisted video on another YouTube channel I have, because I was just soliciting opinions about it. I really like the sounds, but I noticed, like, when I watch other people's videos, they use a lot of reverb, they use a lot of delay, things are pretty wet. And one of the complaints that the guys in my band had about the other guys, especially the guy with the Helix, is that the sounds are so wet that, like, on stage, it's kind of hard to hear things. Everything kind of got muddied up. So I kind of ran things the way I do with my Deluxe Reverb, which is not a ton of reverb. Usually you can feel the reverb when you're playing, but you don't hear it so much. I don't, unless I'm playing like surf music or something along those lines. And the comment was on the cleaner sounds, it was almost a little too bone dry. On stage, on the gig, it actually felt pretty good, because I was playing in 2 venues that were very live venues. One of them was like an 800 or so seat concert hall. Put a picture here. And then the other one was a brick-walled, concrete-floored bar, right? So there was plenty of ambience around my sound in the room. But when I went to record these things in preparation for making this video, I was like, oh, this isn't necessarily as awesome sounding as some of the things that I hear other guys do. And I think what it comes down to is that when you're dialing in sounds for your gig through the way that you're going to hear it, you really have to modify stuff to the point where it works best in that environment. All right, and so what you're getting is, these are my actual live sounds. I went back and added a little bit of reverb, but barely any reverb, and that's the sound that you hear in the performance piece. And most of the sounds are either the Deluxe Reverb or the Brit Silver. I used to own a Silver Jubilee Marshall when they came out in the late 80s. That was like my first real amp, believe it or not. And that's like one of the models I kind of really gravitated towards in this. So that's, that's part of the fun for me, is I'm actually revisiting a sound I had, when I was a kid. But it's actually very workable for what I'm doing. Now, we're going to go to where I'm playing through some stuff and demonstrating some things. And we'll talk about impulse responses. At the end of this video, I'm going to put the original test video of all of those sounds. And the sounds in there, the first 2.5 minutes are the Deluxe Reverb sounds with drive pedals. There's also a Morgan AC20 patch that I really like. There's a Tweed Bassman sound, and also the also the Brit Silver, the Jubilee Marshall sound. So I'm going to leave those, just if you're interested in hearing those, they'll actually be there. And that's exactly the sounds that I used during the shows over the weekend. Whereas this, I've been kind of tweaking with things a little bit since then. So you'll get a little bit of both. There'll be links down below, either Amazon affiliate links where we get a small commission if you buy through them. I'll put links to anything I may talk about in the video. We also have an online store with water bottles and shirts and all that kind of stuff. Every little bit helps us and supports the channel moving forward. Okay, so let's go through some sounds. I'm playing right now my, I guess it's a 2012 Telecaster Deluxe 60th anniversary. I don't know what it is. Anyway, I like it a lot. You've seen it in a lot of videos. And this is basically the guitar I play during the first set of the cover gig. I use it for some of the fusion stuff. It's a good, basic, clean guitar. It's also got a really beefy bridge pickup, so I can use it for some crunch sounds without it being too thin. So let's start with our Deluxe Reverb here. We start off with the amp. Nothing too exciting. One thing I am doing is I'm using scene controllers for volume and level on models, partially so that on certain sounds I can actually have a little bit more gain than on other ones. The biggest problem I've had with the FM3 is the fact that this doesn't support 2 amplifier blocks. So if you're switching between amp models, you're actually stuck with a little bit of a dropout audio-wise. So in the case of this, basically each patch or each preset here is going to be based around a single amp, and this is all based around the Deluxe Reverb with some overdrive pedals that you'll see in the drive block here in a minute. I love the clean sounds, and it works as well as my Deluxe does. My biggest disappointment, I think, with the Fractal stuff are the drive blocks, though. You'll kind of see, you'll hear some things going on. Now, the next thing here is the cabinets. I've always liked greenbacks. I'm kind of picky about these things, and I ended up with a combination of 2 different cabinets here. Now, Fractal has a million different IRs on this thing. I don't know, maybe I just didn't try hard enough looking for the right one. But what I ended up with was I have a couple of IR packs, one from Celestion and one from York Audio. And I really liked what we have here. We have the G12M Heritage. It's a 112. I've used this one kind of from the beginning. And this is also I believe this is also in my Strymon Iridium for reference. And it's got a 121 and a 57 as far as microphones, right? So that's this sound. All right, that was cool. Wasn't completely what I wanted. This is the York Audio one. Like a Smelly Cat from Friends. What I really liked was the idea that combining them actually got me closer to the sound of my real amp, right? Which just has a standard, just a regular old Celestion greenback in it, like you could buy at Guitar Center. I think it's even one of the Chinese ones, like one of the newer ones. Notice I'm using the Ultra Res IRs. I don't know, go big or go home, I guess. I also have a gate here in the middle. I think this is like a Leon Todd thing. And it's not super important to these sounds, but it actually does keep things kind of quiet when I'm not playing. Setting the gate threshold was kind of important, though, because I didn't want it to be obviously chopping off notes and things, especially on the quieter tones. You'll hear it a little bit more pronounced on the heavy dirt sounds that I've got. So my first sound here, my first scene, I should say, is really just clean amp. There's a little bit of compressor going. I kind of discovered I like that. I'm usually never big on compressors, but on this, here's without. Here's with. It's a small thing, but it makes me happy. And I think you'll see there's some of these sounds where I'm not using the compressor at all. A little bit of reverb. If we go to the reverb block here. I was using, and this is what's in the other video, and this is what I used all weekend, was this medium room. And it's probably even the stock settings on it. By itself, it's just enough to feel the reverb, which is what I like. I don't like having a ton of reverb kind of clouding up my sounds for most of these kinds of gigs. I tend to play in some really live rooms, so that's probably a big part of it. All right. So I'm trying to be a little bit less dry, and even that's not really that much. Sometimes when I shoot these videos, like what you actually hear with the video compression is less than what I'm actually getting. But I'm going to try this. This is the sound. I'm running the FM3 along with the FC6 Mark II foot controller. And the layout that I'm using is the OMG9 layout, which is one of their preset layouts that actually makes a lot of sense for live performance. Now, the first button is presets. The second button is scenes on the FM3. And the last one, you can go directly to the effects, which is kind of cool. If I'm in like the Deluxe Reverb preset, if I go to scenes, I've got one that's clean, one that's dirty. This one's called blues, but it's literally, it's just the clean with like some sort of drive pedal, like a tube scream or something. My chorus sound. Phasers. And then kind of a boosted lead. Right? And that's, that gets me actually through quite a few sounds or quite a few tunes in the first set of that cover gig. So this preset, as far as scenes go, the first one on all of my presets right now is just basically a clean sound. The second one on this one is like a dirty crunch. And unfortunately, that's literally just a drive pedal in front of the clean sound. So that's the Zen Master. It's like their Zen drive. In my pedal board, I really like using... Actually, I've got an extra one here. I've got a couple of these. The J-Rocket, the Dude pedal. This one's got dog hair all over it. And it's kind of like their Dumbly kind of deal. Or a Dumbly kind of thing, I should say. So I'm kind of close. It's not perfect. But that's kind of my... I can roll it back. Now, just out of curiosity here, if we go to the gate, there's a little bit of noise. It's not that much. Like, this would be acceptable on stage, but I kind of like having that. It's got a little bit of delay, but like almost no delay. I like mono tape delays. If I was to kill the reverb here. It's almost not there anymore. Anyway, kind of me going through and trying to reproduce what I do live with the other pedal board. That part's not really making a whole lot of sense, as you can tell, but I'm working on it. If we go to the blues sound, it's once again, it's the clean sound. If you notice, there's no compressor. And the drive pedal on this one is the Esoteric ACB, which is basically like the exotic AC booster. If I remember correctly, headphones is kind of hard to hear, but if I roll the volume back, it kind of cleans up a bit. So I got a rhythm guitar. If I roll it up, all right, then I've got a little bit more boot. The actual lead sound on this preset, like I was saying before, is that Zen Master. This one I'm going to add some more delay to later. Typically there is a little bit more delay in my lead sounds, but that's that. The chorus, I really love the chorus on this thing. If you notice, the compressor has kind of come back. I like the dimension It's kind of based off of that, the Boss Dimension. They had a bunch of, I think, like rack mount and pedal choruses. I end up playing a lot of 80s stuff, so the 80s stuff, that's where this stuff gets used. Otherwise, I'm not a big chorus fan, but this is actually really nice. I like this. The phaser, I generally tend to like phase 90. I'll actually end up using this more as an alternate kind of whooshy sound on cover gigs. So that's the Deluxe Reverb sound. That's kind of my bass sound. The major crunch sound, like when the night gets a little bit more aggressive, and I usually switch to my Les Paul. Right, that's the bass rhythm sound for this, and that's the Brit. And you notice this is a lot simpler sound, but it's the Brit Silver, which is the Silver Jubilee. The cabinet I'm using is Leon Todd's, I believe that's Leon Todd's TV mix, maybe? You know, I don't even know. And I'm not even using the high-res. Interesting. Let's go ultra-res since I've got the... We're going to save that. So I've got a clean sound. It's not the greatest clean sound. Literally, I'm just running the gain with the scene controllers. You can see scene 1. You've got 0% on the amp gain, and then the master volume's at 88. You can even see here the drive here is at 0. Master volume is at 8 there. And then if we go back to the scene controllers, scene 2 and scene 3 basically have the gain at about 37% with the master turned down a little bit. So when I go to the crunch, same amp. I'll make those changes with the amp window open here. Right? You can kind of see that it automates it basically. The last sound, well, there's a couple other sounds, but there's kind of a lead sound. The EQ here is part of the, it's one of those things I kind of learned. It's nice to get rid of some of the higher frequencies, some of the fizziness out of these sounds. The Leon Todd and Cooper Carter amp in the room kind of thing, usually they'll take out frequencies below maybe 80 hertz, and they start killing things above about 6,500. As I've been playing with this, just using that as a catch-all EQ profile has not been the most helpful, but I will go through these and maybe say, hey, you know what, let's bump a little bit here. The graphic EQs have been kind of one of the best things about shaping these sounds for being on stage. I do have a kind of a little bit flangery sound here with the clean. And then I've got wet crunch. Right. So I'm going to do something real quick. We're going to switch guitars, and we're back. It's Les Paul time. Towards the end of the evening, actually, usually my cover gigs are they're 3 sets, usually between 60 and 90 minutes each. And the first set's usually more classic rock, things that the Telecaster works really good for. As we get later into the night, things get heavier and more obnoxious. Suddenly, it's nice to have some humbuckers in the mix. Now, believe it or not, that sounds great through my monitor. It sounds a little fizzy like this, but for whatever reason, I kind of like this. The clean sound. Is what it is. The lead sound. Still kind of working on that one. The wet crunch. That's the one that actually worked the best on stage. I'm still playing with these, but that's the basic sound here. I'm pretty happy with. Yeah, a lot of the hard rock stuff that we play is either 80s or it's like 90s, like Blink-182 or things like that. And through the big PA and the big room, it's actually pretty good. It's actually pretty focused, and I like it. Some of the sounds I liked, I didn't really get a chance to use this weekend. I really like the AC20, which is like their Morgan Vox amp. I only have a couple patches. Still working on this one. But it's nice. I've never really had a Class A amp like this that I've really bonded with. And this model is actually working really good for me, so I'll probably end up using this a little bit more. And I've also, one of the other things that I really like is the Tweed Deluxe. I play a lot of blues. It'd be nice to have something a little bit more authentic for some of those. So I'm still working on this one, but that's literally, I think everything's pretty stock. I also have to admit that the Brown Sound preset, the stock one's a little bit of a guilty pleasure for me. So I kind of mess with this one a little bit, maybe too much. I really that tune was one of the things that got me started playing guitar. So I like it. Anyway, so I end up, I kind of keep that one handy. Occasionally we do pull out some Van Halen. I'm not even really messing with it, though, literally. Here's the variant. Presets on this thing have been great as starting points. But the best thing that I learned from all of the online or YouTube resources is that at the end of the day, starting with just the amp block and just a cabinet block and getting a good sound that way, even just starting with the defaults and going from there has kind of been the best thing. I tried taking presets from the factory presets and modifying them, and I kind of went in circles with it. I never really got what I wanted. But as soon as I did this, and I got this from a Leon Todd video, so I started off with just an amp and just the right cabinet, got the basic sound that I wanted, then I started adding stuff, and everything started coming together. So that's probably the best advice I've got as far as this goes. All right, so here's the deal. I'm going to add the original demo video that I did for the forum. I'll even put a link to the forum conversation down below too, so you can kind of see what the guys had to say. And that's it for this right now. I'll probably come back in a month or two once I've played more shows and I've had a little bit more experience with this thing, and share what other insight and see how these sounds have kind of modified. Because what's happening is, now that I've used them, I'm actually starting to come up with other thoughts on how to use this thing a little bit better. But I have to play around with it a bit. So that's the deal. Thanks again for hanging out. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, the like button, all that happy stuff, the notification bell, and I'll see you next time.